Good morning. Welcome everyone from the British Embassy in Berlin. It's a very great pleasure that you all came out this morning at this early hour. Early already in Berlin and in Brussels and across the continent, but even earlier in London. So thank you so much for everyone to join us for the launch of the third major report that the Digital Power China Research Consortium has published. This time, what we look at is reverse dependency. We call it reverse dependency, making Europe's digital technological strengths indispensable to China. So we will talk about this and walk you through the main results and the rationale behind this report. But in general, I think it's fair to say what we try to do is look at the other side of the coin. We've been discussing the vulnerabilities of Europe. And this time we try to change the perspective and rather look at Europe's strengths. Before we start, just a few technical issues that I wanted to highlight here. We are recording the first part of the session where we present, but we will stop that recording when we get to Q&A. So don't worry, you won't be, your question won't be featuring in the recording, but just for you to be informed. Also, I would like to thank a few organizations in advance. First of all, the two funders, the British government. I'm looking here to the room because some are sitting here with me in the British Embassy. To the government of the Netherlands, we had two workshops that were generously supported by the China and Europe Research Network, a EU cost action. And of course, I would like to thank all those that have been actively contributing either as authors or as language editor, or other colleagues in the German Council on Foreign Relations who have set up this meeting or have helped us in the last meters to get the report layouted and out to you. And with that, maybe I should mention my own name. My name is Tim Rühlig. I'm a China fellow with I.D.E.A with the European Commission at the moment, but seconded from the German Council on Foreign Relations. And whatever I say today is not only not in my capacity as an official of the European Commission, but in fact, this project was also developed and run before I joined the Commission. So it really doesn't reflect any thinking of the Commission or any other EU institution. With that, let's jump into it so you get a bit of a taste of what we found. Now, as I already briefly sort of mentioned, I think in the last couple of months and last 2 years, I would say, we have extensively discussing Europe's goal of technological de-risking to maintain its sovereignty, to maintain its ability to act independently in a world where not only China's technological footprint is growing, where not only China is becoming more prominent, but where dependencies as such become more weaponized, become sort of being used for political purposes. And we have been focusing on the question, how can we then reduce strategic dependencies we have on a country like China, that the EU has defined not only as a partner and competitor, but also systemic rival. And for the British, this is not fundamentally different. So the question has always been, how can we reduce these strategic dependencies? Our report does not question this goal, is not in any way sort of challenging that approach. But what we face in Europe is the problem of highly transnational technological ecosystems. So it is not easy to reduce dependencies to a degree where you achieve enough autonomy from China to be capable of acting so freely and without any sort of considerations and restrictions on possible implications, constraints resulting from technological dependencies on China. And if autonomy is not the only ingredient that helps you preserve European sovereignty, then the question is, what else can come into the picture? And that is what we call strategic entanglement. So to look at dependencies from a different coin, from a different side, look at the other side of the coin, look at reverse dependencies. So how can we make sure China, that is also needing European technology at this moment, will also still need those European technological capabilities. In short, sort of, can we remain indispensable, technologically indispensable to China? Now, the problem with that is that we really have a knowledge gap. We don't really know at this point precisely where the Chinese need us. And it is not as easy as to say they need us in AI or they need us in chips or something. It is much more nuanced. We are talking about technological niches. So it is not such a broad field, but you need to delve rather into the details to understand, okay, there are certain elements in value and supply chains and innovation cycles where the Chinese actually profit from European input. And that understanding that is quite demanding. And for this, Digital Power China has put together interdisciplinary teams of engineers, computer scientists, China scholars, economists to work together in small teams on different, in total 12 case studies, to analyze a bit from different angles, triangulating different types of sources, both Chinese language documents, academic Chinese language academic documents, but also policy documents coupled with a bunch of other data, technical assessments to sort of verify what the Chinese have been discussing and finding is actually correct. With that, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Jan-Peter Kleinhans. He is working as a director for geopolitics and technology at Stiftung Neue Verantwortung. I will introduce my colleagues always before they speak so that we don't have sort of a lengthy introduction of all speakers in the beginning. And maybe JP, over to you to walk us through some of the very first findings of the framework in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Tim, and good morning, everybody, from my side as well. Tim already mentioned it's not just enough to look at specific technology niches, but it's also a question of understanding why a reverse dependency, or more popular, why a choke point exists. And to that, we try to, since we cover so many different technology ecosystems, we try to bring a little bit of consistency, a little bit of a intellectual framework to the job. And to that end, we first asked ourselves, well, where does the technology strength lie? Is it the commercialization? Is it based on a strength of European companies based on their IP and patents? Is it a strength of research, development, and innovation? Where is the source of this technology strength of Europe? Because this already looks very different in the different ecosystems that we looked at. Based on that, we also thought about, or tried to assess in each case study, what is the leverage here? So what we mean by that is there substitutability? So in one of the areas that I looked at together with John Lee from East-West Futures, lithography equipment, there is a broad discourse about the substitutability of certain types of lithography with older technologies. So some of you might be familiar with the discussion that for 7 nanometer chip production, you don't need extreme ultraviolet lithography tools, but you can make do with older generation lithography tools. So that would be an example what we mean with substitutability. Another question is there foreign availability? So maybe right now the market is dominated by European companies, but maybe there are other companies out there that can provide the same technology. So by leveraging this choke point, it would simply evaporate quickly because of foreign availability. So to understand what is the real leverage here, we looked at the different, so to speak, conditions that come with this technology strength. And based on this, we then looked at, well, based on the type of strength and the degree or amount of leverage that we really have here, what could be the different levels of ambition for Europe? And what we mean with that is we categorized it in four levels of ambition that are, each one is more ambitious than the other one in terms of controlling technology transfer toward China. So the first one is, let's say, traditional threat prevention, where it's simply about ensuring that dual-use technology does not fall into the hands of China. I would say this is largely the status quo already. The second one, ability to deny, would be the ensuring that Europe has the ability to deny China technology in case China wants to go against the security interests of Europe. Ability to act, the third level, is then one step further, where it's about Europe ensuring that China continues to depend on European technology to, again, not just ensure that China cannot go against the security or foreign policy interests of Europe, but also to ensure continued dependence, continued entanglement with Europe. And lastly, curtailment is basically about that, making it as hard as possible for China to develop this technology through severe control of technology transfer. And that would be the fourth level of curtailment. Maybe with that in mind, we can go to the next slide, Tim. To make it a little bit more concrete, because it's always hard to talk about frameworks and approaches in the abstract, here you can see a snapshot from the report for the case study of lithography equipment. And as always, take it with a grain of salt, because if you try to break down 15 pages of analysis into a nice chart and a few points, of course you lose the details. But here you can see how we worked through that framework. So if you start on the top left, the strength of the source of technology strength in Europe for lithography equipment, our assessment is that in all three dimensions, so R&D&I, IP and patents, production, commercialization, Europe has a very high technology strength in lithography equipment. Then the type of technology strength is based on not just technological excellence, but also the commercialization advantage, having already a lot of equipment out there in the field that is hard to replace, but also on the R&D&I side, a lot of research partnerships with third countries, which again strengthens Europe's position in the broader ecosystem. Based on this assessment, we then came to the conclusion of, when we analyzed the leverage, that there is, of course, a very high leverage for Europe in lithography equipment. Of course, then the question is, this is kind of the theory of it, but then in practice, a host of questions come along that you have to take into account when you think about your, at the bottom, the feasibility of levels of ambition. So that can entail how to keep China entangled, because if we want, for example, to ensure our ability to act, it necessitates that China continues to use European lithography equipment, that China stays entangled with the European ecosystem. We need to find common ground with allies about a joint level of ambition, or else, for example, our export controls are not aligned and don't go in the same direction. So then in the end, you see where we think the feasibility of the different levels of ambition. In the case of lithography equipment, we see this low for threat prevention and ability to deny, simply because currently there's misalignment in terms of export controls, and high for the ability to act and curtailment. As a last point, I think it's important to understand that this level of granularity is only possible if you look at very specific technology niches, as Tim mentioned, and with the following up case studies that the colleagues will provide, it also becomes clear that this assessment looks fundamentally different in each technology ecosystem. With that, I would give it back to you, Tim.
Thanks, JP. We thought to provide you with very brief examples, 3 brief examples. JP just introduced to you the lithography case, and we aim for something similar from my next wonderful colleague, Una Bērziņa-Čerenkova. She is a professor at Riga Stradiņš University and heading the China program also at the Latvian Institute of International Affairs. You have done a fascinating case study on genomic data and the fact that the Chinese are very interested in European genomic data. Over to you, Una.
Perfect. And I apologize if my sound isn't just right. I realized that my headphones just died, so I'll be yelling at the computer, and I hope it works. It's a pleasure to be here. And let me take over from JP here. What we did, a group of 4 authors, is we realized that the Chinese government has really been emphasizing biotech, including genomic data, as a national priority. It comes out in the documents very clearly. And there have been impressive levels of investment and numbers of public offerings since you can draw the line at 2015, but it's been intensifying. Chinese scientists have been emphasizing the need to onshore everything genomics, including the databases, and also the data storage and the data analysis facilities to China. Now, what does that mean? That means that we are, on one hand, coming to an understanding ourselves that genomic data is a resource, is a strategic resource. On the other hand, as China is also coming to this conclusion. And European genomic data is indispensable to China's biotech and medtech, both the research at home, but also exports. At the same time, we cannot overlook that international collaboration has been a very important contributor to innovation worldwide and to collective progress. Now, there have been many cases between the Europeans, including both the EU and the UK and China, where there have been joint research partnerships, bilaterally, multilaterally, and those have also included sharing of sensitive genomic data. However, we see now that the growing geopolitical competition and concerns about the application of discoveries have had a chilling effect in a broad range of areas. My other colleagues have written about other areas, but of course, including genomic data sharing. Now, you see here a case study that we did. We looked at the example of Latvia MGI Tech, which is a subsidiary of BGI, a Chinese-owned genomic institute. And so what does this mean, having MGI Tech in Latvia? What does it really mean for Europe and for European strengths or reverse dependencies and also vulnerabilities? So our main conclusion, and of course, I absolutely echo JP that pushing it all into one slide, please read the report and please ask us if you have any questions. But the the main idea that we believe is that the source of European technology strength lies in research and innovation. No surprise there, given the specialization of genomic data. And the type of our technology strength is technological excellence, coordination of conditioning of market access, the regulatory side, political and normative factors as well, and research partnerships with third countries, which is a very important part of this, because we cannot go it alone if we want to stay competitive. When it comes to the feasibility of level of European ambition, we believe that we fall squarely into the first two categories. That would be threat prevention and ability to deny. When it comes to threat prevention, our recommendations so we have several core policy recommendations, and everything comes back to enforcement. Yes, we do have some loopholes. I will speak about it in a minute, but enforcement is key. We must prevent illicit use. We must introduce compliance mechanisms to follow up on tech collaborations. We must enhance the role of the EU member states and ethical research committees. What we saw in our case research is that even when the regulation is there, it's sort of a trust environment. It really depends on the trust between the partners. And I'm afraid we're entering a time when that's just not enough. The second thing, yes, loopholes exist. We have to close them. We need stringent controls and synchronized national legal regulations. Again, classical European recommendations synchronize the national levels. And by the way, the US CHIPS Act approach, in our opinion and the opinion of my co-authors, is not at all bad. It is a joined up thinking. We have to see how we can use that in biotech. And now to the ability to deny ambition. The first recommendation is that access must be attuned to consent, to privacy risks, to trust in the data recipient, something I already just mentioned, and reciprocity of data sharing, and also intended use. We would need policies that would promote the development of biotech clusters in our regions. We also should tighten inbound investment screening to cover cases applicable to genomic data, which is, of course, a sensitive question, but it looks like that's the way things are heading. And the last one, I promise, and then I will give it back to Tim. We should increase public high-risk, high-gain R&D investment. We can introduce tax incentives for such investment, and this should be available for European, EU, and like-minded actors. Thank you, and happy to answer more when the Q&As hit.
Thanks a lot, Una. And with that, straight over to another colleague of mine, Araceli Venegas-Gomez. You are the CEO and founder of QURECA, a consultancy that looks at quantum resources and careers. And as the name of your company already suggests, you have been looking into the case of quantum technologies, specifically into quantum sensing for health applications. And I tried to move the slide. Here you go. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Tim. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Let me just set a little bit the scenario why we chose what we chose for this chapter. We really try to look at where Europe is really stronger. I don't know how much you know of quantum technologies. Most of you probably have heard of quantum computing, but you must have heard that quantum computing probably US is quite strong if we compare with maybe Europe and China. So we were looking at different technologies, and we have quantum communication where we know that China was really ahead in all research and development. And we were looking then at quantum sensing, because so far Europe is really the stronger in terms of the research and development of this technology. Quantum sensing, if we look at the market in general, the forecast is around 8 billion in the next 15 years or so. What could be the application of this technology? If you see in the first graph, healthcare is a big chunk of it. I'm not going to go into details. Yes, a lot of these technologies can have a dual use, and this might be things that what we have really defined is that you will see here. It could be really interpreted in another way, but we focus on healthcare because if you look at the map over the top there are a lot of companies in Europe that they look at applications of quantum sensing for healthcare. The number of companies, the number of unique applications, and the degree of development, so the tier or level of this technology is really much better, much stronger, and much more developed in Europe versus China. Now, of course, what we want here is to ensure that this remains the same, right? In the end, we know that, as usual, and Tim, I think you mentioned before, and GP, China can always overtake us, can always kind of push and be at the same level or even better. But right now, how can we prevent that? Well, we need to ensure that we remain where we are. We need to boost the supply chain. We need to understand the supply chain analysis. And this is something that we started to do within this case study, but there is much more to understand. There are so many underpin technologies that have to be developed to have at the end these devices for quantum sensing. How can we ensure that the supply chain have no dependencies on China? Or how can we ensure that China depends on Europe? That's very, very important. We need to understand, of course, the export controls and how the investment is gonna look like. If we ensure that we continue investing in the development of these technologies, going out of the lab, applications and use cases that these can be used in hospitals, if we boost that in Europe, then we can be sure that we remain stronger. It's important that there is also money from the government to ensure that the research continues pushing in laboratories, in the universities and research institutions. It's important, as Una mentioned as well, the cooperation. That's really, I think, key. Europe as a whole, I think one of the strongest things is there are a lot of different countries with different strengths, and putting together that makes us stronger. So let's try to boost these cooperations. And that means, of course, between academia and industry. And the last point here is really how can we ensure that, again, we go from just what is in the lab to understand that this is a new market, and that it can be used at the end in hospitals or for the society. How can we ensure that? Well, let's think about maybe adjusting different policies. Let's think about how new regulations can be into place. We know that this is an emerging technology, and regulation is something that there are a lot of things going on, but well, this is really in the nascent. It's really in the early stages. So let's ensure that this is done as soon as possible. Standardization kind of goes with that. And the last thing is ensure that the prototypes and going out of the pure research and use of the technology is ensured. So the degree of European leverage, we say, is kind of medium, but what we need to do is to ensure that the visibility of ambition kind of remains the same. And with that, these are our ideas for policy. Over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Araceli and Una and JP, of course. Well, we are already almost at 9:30, but to wrap things maybe up with one or two final slides. So we, of course, looked also into the question. This is also an iron principle of the Digital Power China Research Consortium, that our research is always rooted in robust academic research. We don't conduct academic research for the sake of just telling you that things are complex and difficult, but we also challenge ourselves to come up with concrete policy recommendations for Europe, meaning geographical Europe, so EU and the United Kingdom. I won't walk you through this table. That is already a shortened version of the one that you find in the report that I believe you already find the link to in the chat, because it should be out by now. So you can also check out that PDF. But maybe just to say 2-3 points, highlight them. One is, I think, what is important, if you go through the different technology chapters, you will find quite different policy recommendations, which reconfirms once again what has been repeated throughout the last 30 minutes, that each technological ecosystem is remarkably different, and we may sort of search for this one nice tool that we can plug in and solve all our problems or remain strong, but that simply doesn't exist. It also depends which policy tools are the right ones. Does not only diverge across technologies, but it also diverges depending on the level of ambition that you aim for. That I think is quite intuitive. But then sort of without sort of going into details here, let me say this. You may be familiar with this triangle of promote, protect, and partner. I think for the case of reverse dependencies and remaining strong, especially the promote and partner measures are really essential. That doesn't mean that one should not look into protect at all, but the public discussion, at least, often emphasize very much the protect measures, and promote and partner are really crucial. For example, thinking about sort of the conducive market environments is really essential, as Europe's strength is that we, compared to China, are a free market economy, so we can make a better use actually of the market forces. But for that, we of course need to understand market environments and provide conducive ones. What I think is also necessary to highlight here is that we haven't untapped the potential of digital partnerships. So working with third countries that are not China to diversify, that can be like-minded partners. It doesn't necessarily always have to be like-minded partners. I think that is also something that stands out from looking across the cases. And finally, to pick up sort of a discussion that is intensifying in Europe, that is the question, do we need outbound investment screening? As I emphasized before, I think that the general finding is in this study that promote and partner needs to look is what we need to look at most, and not so much to protect. Still, what we do find is that we see outbound investment screening as useful across not all but several of the cases, and interestingly, not just in very narrow in the very narrow sense of protecting security, but also beyond that for issues of targeted competitiveness. I mean, that is, of course, then a political discussion to have whether one wants to have this. The role of Digital Power China is sort of more to show what is effective in what ways and why, whether that's then going to be used as a political issue. Now, that would be the time to hand it over to colleagues from the British and the Dutch government. But I want to divert a bit from the rule here and sort of show you one last slide, because I felt we have been talking a lot about different cases now, and maybe it's nice to show you at least one slide of an overview. And I just picked now sort of the level of ambition. So because many have been asking me throughout the research that we've conducted, so how feasible is it? Can Europe actually remain indispensable to China? So that is the complex answer that we can give. I don't walk you through the 4 levels of ambition. Again, JP has done this. Maybe I just leave this slide for a few more seconds so that you can have a look at that. What you can see is the icons in green at the top there. If you do the right things in 10 years' time from now, it is quite likely that Europe can preserve indispensability. The yellow ones, if you do the right things, there's at least a fair chance of doing that. The red, you really have to stretch. The red icons, you really have to stretch, but it's not completely impossible. if the icon of a certain case study does not appear in one of the columns, then we think this is impossible. And what you can see for curtailment, we really only see lithography being feasible. So the hard choke point that we all think of, we believe there's really only this one case, but it doesn't mean that you have several options for all the cases, ranging from threat prevention to the ability to act. With that, I would hand it over to the officials from the British and the Dutch government. And Benedetta was advertised in the invitation. Unfortunately, she could not make it in the very last minute, but I'm very grateful that Kieran from the British Embassy is stepping in, so I'm handing over to Kieran.
Tim, thank you, and good morning, colleagues. It's great to see so many friends and familiar faces online. Benedetta passes her apologies, but I'm Kieran McCaughey. I lead our work on China here at the British Embassy in Berlin. I'm really looking forward to the discussion online, so I'll keep this brief. I suppose I just wanted to start by saying thank you. This is a really exciting project. And the first time that Tim mentioned it to us, it felt like a really natural fit. We were attracted to it right from the start, both because of the really clear and innovative methodology that was being used that we've not seen anywhere else, and because it felt like it aligned with lots of the questions that we were looking at in the British government, and because of the expertise in digital power China that it would give us the opportunity to collaborate with. So it was a bit of a no-brainer for us to work with this, and we're delighted to have co-sponsored it and to have done so with Dutch colleagues too. This feels like a really important partnership to us, and it's one that we're looking forward to continuing. As I said, we're looking at all of the same questions in the British government, and this feels like a really timely and thoughtful contribution to a critical policy debate. We're going to want to take this report away and study it in detail because it's rich and it's full of insights, and there's lots that gives us pause for thought and things to think about. I wouldn't do justice to that today if I tried to dig into it too much, but I did just want to offer 4 brief reflections more broadly on the report and the process of the report before I hand over to my colleague Tamsin Heath, who might want to say a few words about the UK's approach. So the first is just an obvious point around expertise, which I think has been drawn out really clearly so far in the presentations. This is an area where it's incredibly important that we have deep and nuanced understanding of the technologies that we're talking about and the ecosystems that we're working with. And as a policymaker, it's really important to us that we're integrating that expertise into our policies, into our approaches, and that we're harnessing those insights to make sure that we're tackling those challenges in a nuanced and effective way. This report is helping us to do that, and it's delivering clear, actionable insights that we're going to want to take away and think about. So expertise is really at the front and centre of this. It's at the front and centre of the UK's approach too, and this is why it felt like such a natural partnership to us. The second is strengths, and I think Tim and colleagues have brought that out really clearly. There's inevitably a wee bit of a risk when we talk about economic security issues that we focus overly on vulnerabilities, and I think this report is a really helpful corrective to that in really highlighting the importance of us thinking clearly about our strengths. That's an approach that chimes really clearly with the UK's approach as well. We set this out in our integrated review refresh last year. That's the UK's equivalent of a national security strategy, where we talk about building our strategic advantage for investing in the sources of our strengths. And you see that feed through into some of our recent publications, including our semiconductor strategy. And again, my colleague Tamsin may wish to touch on that in more detail. The third reflection is just around collaboration. The report draws out really helpfully some of the strengths that the UK has to bear in this space, in technologies such as AI and quantum, It also draws out really clearly that those strengths are distributed across a range of European partners. And I suppose that leads you naturally to the conclusion that this is an area where we need to work ever more closely together. That's something we're really committed to doing, and to being part of a sort of European approach to some of these transnational challenges. So I think it's a really helpful reflection for us to take away, and I hope for colleagues on the line to take away too, that these are big, complex and cross-border issues which we hope to work on ever more closely together. And then finally, just a point on networks. I mean, we felt delighted to be welcomed into this network, into Digital Power China. It's an incredibly high-powered network with some fantastic expertise, which has been deployed brilliantly in this report. We also hope that you'll consider us part of your network as well, and that you will look on the British government as friends that you can continue working with on these issues. And so perhaps just as a final thought, please do see us as friends that you can keep this conversation going with, and we're very much looking forward to doing so over the coming weeks and months. And I will pause there and perhaps, Tim, hand over to Tamsin, if that works. Tamsin, over to you.
Okay, so we hear that there is an issue with Tamsin's connection. So Mark from the Dutch government, maybe over to you then.
Good morning to all colleagues and thanks to all presenters. I'm Mark Moquette. I'm Knowledge Envoy for on China for the Netherlands, and I can just echo the brilliant intervention of Kieran, because you stole all my talking points. But I do want to add something first to the thank you, and that also we have the recognition of a sort of immediate liking for this proposal. And importantly, our China Knowledge Network is a collaborative effort of all 12 government ministries in the Netherlands. And so when we have our program meeting setting out the objectives for the next year, this one fell in and was immediately liked by many of them. So it ended in the top of our selection. And I think that echoes what the remarks that Kieran made, and I don't have to repeat them. We also very much like the quality of the research offered. And I can echo also, including the network part and the partnering part between the UK and the Netherlands and Europe that you've made, Kieran, because I think it's really very important. We're in this as Europe together. It's a bit more than the European Union. And I think it, also the outcome of this study underlines that there's no way around it, even if you wouldn't like each other, which we don't, of course. We do like each other. And so I think there is an echo that I would just want to share at this point, that we've just had the presentations of the Letta report and the Draghi report. It is very much on my mind when I listen to you. You have 12 tech topics, very complicated, each one very different from the other, but it's an ecosystem of ecosystems. But then the complexity even rises because these ecosystems, these tech ecosystems, are embedded in what Europe wants to be itself. And I think where Draghi and Letta are talking about arranging the leftovers from the single market, we have to deal with our capital market, we have to deal with our energy market, we have to deal with our telecoms market, we have to build interconnectors, all these big projects, and Draghi on top of that, pleading for a common approach, a radical change. In the same line, we have to scale up. It means we have to really do much more about innovation, not just the research that's top notch, but we have to innovate. We have to organize that, which is part of industrial policy as well. And we have to fend for our public goods because they're also under threat. We also have to secure supplies. We've heard the supply chain on quantum as an example, and the workers. I'm still quoting Draghi here. And these agendas of Letta and Draghi, they are in formation now. We're going to a new commission. We're going to a new EP. I think your research is in the core of what this project is about. And it's just as a remark, it's something that we cannot escape. And I think I'm very much looking forward to reading all the 12 cases in detail. But I think that's the backdrop against which we are dealing with the digital power that China is. And now, because I'm from a country that has a company that is among the very few that has the capacity to curtail, if you look at ambition levels, if we talk lithography and ASML, that begs questions to us also, policymakers. Fortunately, I'm not responsible for policies. I only do the knowledge base, so that it gives me a bit more liberty to speak about technology policies. And I think it's the question that you pose, like how to keep China entangled, also has this other side. And I'm saying it because I'm from ASML country. It has the other side that Tim referred to, that this promotion and partnership is not just about others. There will always be a China that we will have to work in partnership with on systemic challenges that none of us actually control. And that is, I think, the toughest part. It hasn't been mentioned because we are so much hammering out that we should really get together, organizing our tech options in order to be entangled in a productive way where we can profit from. But I also think China will not go away in this sense. So my one question to all the researchers, and whoever wants to pick it up, please do so, would be, what is the part in the strategic collaboration, that you propose for these 12 tech areas, where we can feel more secure or even more forced to work together with China in order to keep up, I think, the attainability of all the policy points you make. And can we, in so much, disentangle from China? And if we can disentangle, where should we be doing it in order to keep up this positive entanglement, or the minimal entanglement that you fend for? So, I mean, it's not an easy question, and it has to do with more ecosystems than the technical ones. It has to do with the political ecosystems. It has to do with the choices that who we want to become in Europe. So that's just a long-winded addition to Kieran's remarks with one question, and a big thank you to all the contributors to this study.
Thanks a lot, Mark. I'll look at Kieran. Is Tamsin online? Okay, then we hand over to you.
Hello and good morning. Hi, I'm Tamsin Heath. I'm the Deputy Director in charge of Economic Security and Semiconductors in the UK's Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. And apologies for dropping out at just the critical moment. I live underneath the Heathrow flight path, and I'm afraid occasionally my internet drops out at critical moments. So apologies. The UK set up the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology about just over a year ago. And we set it up because we realised that science, innovation and technology was a growing part of the UK's economy. It's 7% of the UK economy, but also because of its growing importance to a range of different policy objectives, from health to national security. And within that, we set up and identified 5 priority technologies: semiconductors, engineering, biology, quantum, AI, and future telecoms. And those kind of underpin how we think about this. And so this report is hugely, hugely helpful for us, because when we're thinking about how we look across those critical technologies, how we get them to grow, but also how we protect them, there's a whole suite of different issues that we are trying to tackle. And unlike the EU, we have a sort of similar kind of economic security approach. We look at how we protect technology, how we promote our technology, and how we partner with different allies to achieve our objectives. And so what we found when we've sort of dug into those issues is there's a whole suite of different policy issues, and we've got a big cross-Whitehall community looking at this in the UK government, looking at the sort of different trade-offs that you have between protection and promotion, and how you look at those different kind of issues. And this kind of framework is quite interesting and quite innovative, and I'm looking forward to really studying it. I'm a sort of China diplomat by background before I joined the Science, Innovation and Technology Department. And I think my experiences of the sort of last 20 years is that we've moved quite a long way You know, I was back in China in sort of 2007, 2009, when we were sort of there in the Beijing Olympics, and it was, reform and opening up. And to move to this position now where we're really trying to sort of get our protection toolkit in the right space, we've moved quite a long way. And we do have to sort of think about that quite hard. It does still feel like there's quite a lot more to do in terms of protecting our toolkits, and in particular in some of the points that you brought out in the discussion about how do we align our protection toolkit. So I think that's something that I'm really keen to sort of study more in terms of what you suggested, and to sort of look into that. And I'm sort of really interested in terms of how has the world changed, and therefore what is the sort of the Europe's role in that? How do we sort of navigate these waters in terms of how we kind of protect our critical technology? How do we promote our technology? How do we work more together? How do we look at all the different kind of policies that we have that sit within that? So I'm really looking forward to digging into the report and thinking about it. I wanted to sort of pose a few kind of questions on it, because I thought sort of some of them might make for kind of interesting discussion. One of which is, I didn't see so much, I've only read the executive summary so far, but I'm quite interested in the role of the US and how you thought about that. And in particular, how do we sort of navigate that? Because that's the sort of the elephant in the room here is sort of how do we navigate that US-China debate, and how do we sort of think about that? I think also sort of thinking about, how do we think about, I think one of the things that's most interesting about economic security is it's not something where government holds all the levers. It's actually a space where you really have to operate between private sector and into research. So how do we sort of navigate that? The reality of sort of achieving our policy objectives is having those fundamental partnerships with businesses and researchers, and to try and find the right way of communicating. So I'm just really interested in sort of how you've sort of seen that, and how do we think about that? I'll pause there, but I'm really looking forward to following up this discussion and reading the report in more detail. Thanks.
Thank you so much to all.